Good morning, everybody out there. You have Carly Cope here from the Shift team. We will go ahead and get started with today's webinar in just about 2 minutes. We'll let a few more people join on today's call. But if you have any questions or comments that you want to send our way before the call starts, feel free to use that chat function, and we will address those as we go through today's webinar. Thanks so much for joining. We'll talk soon. Alrighty, it is 11 o'clock on the dot, so we will go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Carly Cope, and I'm a consultant here at Shift, and I am really looking forward to spending the next 60 minutes or so with each one of you to dig into this topic on how to build an employee development program, one that really drives innovation in the workplace by really focusing on continuous employee education. This is something that the Shift team feels very strongly about here internally, and we come across this often with our clients, that they know they need to focus on their employee growth and development, but they just don't know how to approach it. So today's conversation is going to provide you with some portable tactical tools and steps that you can take on how to build this out within your organization. So whether or not you're starting from scratch and looking to develop a program that makes sense for you and your people, or whether you have something in place that you're looking to refine or improve, today's webinar will be really helpful just to get you in that mindset. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. Let's go through what we'll talk about today's agenda. The first piece, how learning and development fuels business growth. So this is really looking at the connection between what is going on in the world around us as it relates to digital transformation, automation, and just all of the changes going on, and how does that connect to our employees and their growth? It's really talking about why this topic is even important to begin with. The second thing we'll dig into are the keys to creating a culture of curiosity. So what are those foundational elements that we need to have in place so that any program we do come up with is not only successful, but it's sustainable? And then lastly, what are the 5 steps to operationalize learning and development in your business? So this is where we get a little more granular, a little more tactical on how do we actually make this a reality in your workplace. So in today's webinar, I want to make sure it's not just me talking at you. I really want to hear your perspective, your thoughts, your opinions. So the first thing we'll do is launch this poll. I want to hear from all of you, get your thoughts on what is the most important reason to have a learning and development program in your organization. There's no right or wrong answer here. I'm just curious to hear from your perspective, what's the number one reason to have this learning program in place? Is it A, to recruit better talent, B, onboard new hires more effectively, C, improve performance of those existing employees in current roles, D, prepare people for their next roles in the company, or E, make employees feel good? So we're going to give you an opportunity to actually submit your answer using this poll functionality, which you should see here on your screen. And go ahead and just take a few minutes to submit your answers. What is your number one reason on why you're attending today's call and why you think a learning and development program is important? Go ahead. Many folks feel that first part of the employee life cycle, that first step, getting people in the door, focusing on onboarding, making sure we get them off to a good start, is the most critical part of their business and of their people development. Whereas others might really need to focus on those incumbents, those people in their existing roles. How do we elevate them and get them to perform at higher levels? Or maybe you need to focus on your leadership, that top level leadership who are leading other employees within the organization. Maybe you need to focus on them. As we know, a lot of leaders or managers get in their roles, are promoted or placed in their roles with little to no leadership experience. So maybe that's the focus area. There's, again, no wrong answer here, just curious to get your thoughts. So we'll go ahead and close out the poll. And we'll be able to see your results here on the screen. Just 1 second. All right. So it looks like we have a tie, neck and neck tie of C, improve performance of incumbents in current roles, and D, prepare people for their next roles in the company. Absolutely. This is what we'll talk about in this next section, really thinking about what's going on in the world around us. How does this affect individuals in their current roles, and how do we get them to the next level? How do we help them not only improve where they are, but how do we get them to move through their career path, develop as leaders? So thank you for your thoughts. This is really helpful just to understand where you're at and how we can make this the most relevant webinar possible for you. So with that, let's talk about the state of the world, what's going on around us. I'm going to throw out some very interesting and I'd say somewhat alarming stats that we as leaders need to be aware of. First one, current national unemployment rate is the lowest it's been in over 15 years at 4%. This is really, really low, guys. That coupled with the fact that there are 6.8 million job openings out there. There are more choices than ever before for our employees to leave or to look elsewhere. What else? 2.4%. This is the national quit rate, the highest it's been in over 17 years. So what does this tell us? People are leaving. Our employees, our top performers are leaving. They're looking for other opportunities. They're being tempted by other opportunities. The world of recruiting and LinkedIn job search and everything in between is tempting them. It's encouraging them to look and try new opportunities outside of where they are now. So as leaders, we have to think really critically about what are we doing, what systems, processes, initiatives do we have in place within our organization so that we are the most attractive, engaging, and enriching place to work. So that falls on you as a leader to really think about how do we retain our best people, because otherwise they will leave. What else? 40% of employees who don't get that training that they need in the first year of employment will leave an organization. Talk about the quit rate. Like this is alarming too. 40%. If we aren't in a position where we can provide the best possible employee experience within that onboarding stage, then we're really missing out. So you have to ask yourself, take an honest assessment of your onboarding process right now. What kind of experience are you providing new hires? Is there an opportunity to improve the training elements that you have in place? Is there an opportunity to get even clearer on what good looks like for a new hire within that onboarding stage? And also ask yourself, how are you measuring your performance within onboarding, how well you're doing within onboarding? What metrics are you assessing to determine, is this employee really advancing them in the way that we need to, or do we need to kick it up a notch? What do we need to change? Where are people going? People are going where there are jobs that have learning and development at the core of what they do. 42% of employees say that learning and development is the most important benefit when deciding where to work. That's compared to things like compensation, benefits, location, job functionality. Like people want to learn, they're looking to grow. So how are we attracting those people to come to our organization? The ones that do want to learn, Are we showcasing what we have in place? Are we giving them opportunities to come join our company and develop in their career? Automation, what's going on here? We know that by the end of 2020, at least a third of the American workforce will be replaced by automation. This is really scary for a lot of people. You may have heard the concept FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. A lot of people in roles like you see on the screen, office and administrative functions, manufacturing, construction, a lot of people are afraid. They don't know what's going to happen to their role. So our job as a leader is to help them develop those skills that can allow them to advance and evolve when the company evolves, right? Just because you have individuals in these types of roles, it doesn't mean that when we become more automated that these people go away. We want to keep the best of the best. The highest performers are going to be high performers no matter what they do. So how can we provide them those opportunities to grow and develop? Last statistic, companies that do have a strong learning culture enjoy retention rates up to 50% higher than those that don't. Like, who doesn't want to be a part of that statistic? Who doesn't want to retain the best of the best? So let me ask you, and this is an opportunity for you to submit a response in the chat box. Again, really want to get your thoughts, your perspectives here. How do you, within your organization as a leader, help your top performers consistently get better? The focus here is on top performers. And the reason we want to focus here is because many times, many organizations we work with make the mistake of neglecting their top performers. They think that because they are high achievers, high performers, we don't really have to worry about them. Or, you know, they got this. We don't really need to pay attention to them. But that's actually the opposite of how we need to think. These top performers are the ones that are moving the needle most for our company. They're the ones that most directly impact our business outcomes. So we have to pour into them and their development. So right now within your organization, do you have a training program in place for your employees, specifically for your top performers? Do you have a mentorship program in place, maybe where you can allow employees to mentor other leaders and you can allow high performers to mentor their peers, their colleagues? Are you giving them leadership opportunities? And while this might not come with a title, maybe you're giving them opportunities to lead initiatives or projects or lead team meetings or client interactions. Go ahead and type here in the chat box what you are doing right now within your company to really engage and continue to develop your top performers. So don't be shy. I know I have I know the leaders on this call, many of you are not shy. I know that for a fact. I just want to hear from you. What are some examples of things that you're doing within your company? All right, here are some, let's see here. Oh, you know, I'm sorry about that. I realized my screen hadn't been showing the past few slides. You didn't miss much, just went through those statistics that we saw, but you should be able to see my screen here now. Thank you for flagging that. All right. Let me see. Anyone give us your thoughts, your examples of what you're doing there internally to develop top performers? All right, we will come back to this. I'm going to hold you guys to this one. Okay, let's keep moving. Culture of curiosity. What does this mean? So let's talk about the foundational elements that we need to have in place so that we can ensure that whatever program we launch is not only successful, it's sustainable. So I picked this quote from Peter Drucker. I really like this. We now accept the fact that learning is a lifelong process of keeping abreast of change. And the most pressing task is to teach people how to learn. Love that last part. The most pressing task is to teach people how to learn. As leaders, it is our job to not only teach people how to learn, but first model the way. We ourselves need to be learners. We ourselves need to create time and space in our schedules to learn and to develop. So similarly, you need to help coach your people to understand how important learning is, making this a focus to the work that you do. Carol Dweck, the author of the book Mindset, talks about this concept of there are two different mindsets in the world. Individuals that have a fixed mindset have a desire to be smart. They have a desire to be smart, so they want to know everything. They're knowers, right? So they don't like to make mistakes. They don't necessarily like to get outside of their comfort zone because they risk failure. They often feel threatened by other people who are successful and who know what they know. Whereas individuals with a growth mindset, they are learners. They have a desire to learn. So they're going to push themselves. They're going to stretch outside of their comfort zones. They're going to ask for feedback, ask questions, because they know that's what's going to help them get better. So I want you to take a minute, take a pen and piece of paper, and just draw out a scale from 1 to 10. 1 representing a fixed mindset and a 10 representing a growth mindset. Take an honest assessment of yourself. Where do you fall on this scale? Do you fall closer to having a fixed mindset where you're pretty comfortable? Maybe you have a lot of years of experience as a leader. Maybe you've had a lot of roles and you're feeling pretty good about where you are, and you're not necessarily looking for that next thing or looking to stretch yourself right now. Or do you fall closer to that growth mindset where you're challenging yourself, you're looking for new opportunities to learn, you're asking colleagues and peers for feedback? You don't have to submit your responses. Just take that honest assessment of yourself and then do the same for the employees within your organization. If you were to plot where the majority of people fall within your company, would it be closer to the fixed mindset or closer to the growth mindset? And the reason we're having you do this is because we want you to think critically about how you can inspire other people, how important it is to have that growth mindset. We want learners within our organization. We don't want knowers. This reminds me of this concept that Thomas Friedman talks about in his book, The World is Flat. He uses this formula, PQ plus CQ is greater than IQ. It stands for passion quotient plus curiosity quotient is greater than intelligence quotient. So what does this mean? This means that when we're looking at ourselves, when we're assessing ourselves, when we're assessing our people, and when we're assessing candidates coming in for potential positions within our company, what's their level of passion? Are they truly passionate about what they do? Or are they just doing it because it's a job? Are they clocking in and out every day just to get a paycheck? Or do they really have a connection to something bigger than themselves? And then curiosity quotient. What's their level of curiosity? Are people asking questions? Are they seeking more information? Are they living in this world that we like to call permanent beta, where they're constantly looking to grow, develop, try new things, experiment new things? And it's not that intelligence is not important, but when we think about, who we're bringing into our organization, especially, we have to be realistic and understand that the world around us is changing, and passion and curiosity are going to outweigh intelligence. No one understands this more than Chris Wilson, the author of the book, The Master Plan. Some of you might be familiar with this, especially if you're from the Baltimore area. Chris was born and raised in Washington, D.C. He grew up in a world just filled with poverty, with violence, with drug abuse. And he himself, at age 17, convicted of federal crime and was sentenced to life in prison. He went into prison, and he could have easily just succumbed to that sentence. He could have easily succumbed to a life of apathy. But he flipped that on its head. He developed what he called his master plan, and this consisted of all of his life goals, short-term and long-term goals, what he was going to set out to achieve, no matter if it was him being in prison or if he was able to get out of prison. He was going to achieve those goals. And he had that growth mindset. He had that agile mindset, knowing that he was going to try new things. He was going to really just expand his comfort zone, get out of his comfort zone and continue to be curious, ask questions, and grow. And because of this, what did Chris do in prison? Number one, he got his GED right away. He then started a book club. He started a career center within the prison walls. He started his own business within prison. He learned several languages. He passed all of his vocational courses, all because he had that curious, lifelong learning mindset. Chris is really a role model that we can follow, and I'd highly, highly recommend reading the book if you haven't done so already. In fact, the first 3 people who email team@shiftthework.com, you'll get a free copy of his book. It's one of the best books that I've read in a long time, and one that has really inspired me to continue to have this growth mindset, continue to be a lifelong learner. And this is something that every person in an organization, whether it's you as a leader or any of your employees, can really benefit from. And if you want to hear more about his story, please feel free to listen. He was an interviewee on one of our Shift Happens podcast episodes. So by all means, visit that, listen to the podcast. Really, really good stuff. All right, so 4 keys to creating a culture of curiosity. This is, again, how do we create that foundation to having an effective learning and development program? Number 1, model the way. As a leader, it is up to you to model the way. Do you have that curious mindset? Do you have that growth mindset? Are you creating time and space for your own learning? Further, are you asking the right type of questions in the workplace? So many times we go into a situation just looking to put out the fire, answer or solve the problem as quickly as we can, instead of asking questions like, what if? What if we tried this approach? Or how might we address it if we did this? What would happen when? Or I wonder when. These types of open-ended questions, that's what spurs and cultivates creative thinking in the workplace. So making it a habit to use this type of questioning versus what's the problem? What's the answer going to be? How did we get here? Those types of questions, those shut people down. We need to light people up. Second key to creating a culture of curiosity, emphasizing learning goals. So many organizations have performance-based goals in place, right? They know the metrics they need to achieve. They know the KPIs they need to hit in order to meet their outcomes. And those are really, really important. But it's not enough. We need to couple those with having learning goals for each individual within our organization. What do I mean by this? Just think about a sales rep within your company. And typically sales reps are responsible for making a certain number of prospecting calls, having a certain number of client meetings, of course, hitting their monthly quotas or quarterly quotas. Those are performance-based goals. But what if you have a sales rep who's been with your company for, let's say, over 5 years and who is just a high performer, all-star internal sales rep? This person always continuously hits their number, but they've recently expressed to you that they want to become an outside sales rep. They want to meet face-to-face with clients. What are some learning goals that you can put in place to get that person to that same level of high performance, regardless of whether they're internal or they're outside sales person? You can build goals around, how do I overcome objectives? How does this person overcome objectives? Maybe building in some role playing and mentorship opportunities for that person. How does this person have really effective needs analysis conversations so that they can relate to a client or a prospective client, they can understand their needs and connect those to the solutions that we have to offer? So really start thinking about pairing performance goals with learning goals. The third element, create space for learning. So empower employees to explore their interests. This is really, really important for you as a leader. Number one, that you're creating space in your busy schedule for learning, and that you're allowing your employees to do the same. Here at Shift, we've launched something this year that we call Shift U Time. And every Friday from 3 to 5 p.m., every single employee across the organization has time blocked off on their calendar. And this is time for them to spend investing in their own development. So whether or not this employee wants to take an online course or sit in on a webinar, listen to a podcast, maybe go get acupuncture, take a run, invest in their own health and well-being. This is all part of the development of our employees. And we actually have barriers set up within our work week schedule to allow for this to happen. Lastly, hire for curiosity. This is where you can use that equation PQ plus DQ is greater than IQ. What's their level of passion? What's their level of curiosity? Are we hiring learners and not knowers? So those are the foundational elements that we need to have in place before we can really operationalize learning. So let's get to the meat. Let's talk about how do we actually make this a reality in the workplace. Before we get into the 5 steps on how to do this, let's walk through this framework briefly. This is Shift's high-performance operating system, and this really encompasses all of the elements that organizations need to take into consideration when looking at their employee experience. In the middle of the wheel or the circle, you see the 3 fundamental elements that organizations need to have clarity on and need to have in place in order for anything else to work within the company as it relates to its people and its human systems. First piece, purpose. Having clarity on who we are as an organization. What are our values? What's our vision and our mission? Second piece, having clarity on what's our system for measurement. How do we actually measure what's important? What are those metrics that we need to be consistently measuring, and how do we measure it? What's our process for doing that? And then lastly, systems. When we talk about systems, we talk about what are those things that are going to ensure that every employee is operating in lockstep, we're all in sync. So it's looking at things like our system of communication, our system of employee recognition, our system of management and planning. All of these things fall into that category. And then in the outer part of the wheel, you see the different stages or steps that are part of the employee life cycle. And you'll see that learning and development plays a role across each and every one of these steps and stages. And one of the mistakes that we see organizations make most frequently is they try to tackle this all at once. They try to bite off more than they can chew. They might say, yes, we need to focus on onboarding. We need to improve our training within onboarding. At the same time, we need to look at a current existing employees and really focus on their people, the people and team development piece. And at the same time, we need to focus on our leadership and helping our high-level leaders really advance in their roles and helping potential next-gen leaders advance. And while all of those things are important, and probably many organizations, including yours, could use some help, could use improvement across all these areas, it's really important that we get very surgical in our approach to learning. We really hyper-focus on what's most important, what's going to move the needle the most within our company to achieve our business outcomes. So this model we use to really frame out the work that we do with a lot of our clients. If you have more questions about this or something in particular is really resonating with you about this, please reach out to us. We're happy to go through it in more detail and talk about how can we apply this and leverage this to help your organization in these different areas across the employee life cycle. When we talk about getting really surgical in our approach, we like to use this concept called lean approach to learning. Many times when we go into an organization and do an assessment of their learning and development programs, we find that they're trying to tackle too much. They're throwing everything at the employee at once and hoping something sticks. Many times they start on the left-hand side with, okay, what do our employees need to know? What do they need to be able to do so that we can achieve our business results? Well, here at Shift, we actually work backwards. We start on the right-hand side of this model. And number one, defining what are the company's goals and outcomes that it needs to achieve to be successful. So getting super clear on what are the outcomes we need to achieve as a company and on the department and team level and individual level. And then we work backwards. Once we have that clarity, then we can define, okay, what do we need to be able to do to achieve those outcomes? And then what do we need to be able to know so that we can do those things to achieve those outcomes? So let's take you through an example. Let's use a sales team again as an example. Let's say I'm a sales rep within an organization, and one of the key outcomes that I need to accomplish and achieve as part of my role is to develop a continuously growing pipeline of qualified prospects. And by qualified, we mean individuals who are decision makers, the ones who have access and influence over the budget, the ones who have expressed need and interest in growing the business. That's one of the outcomes that's part of my role as a sales rep. So what do I need to be able to do? I need to be able to, number one, properly vet who are the decision makers within a company. I need to be able to have that skill set to do that. And then once I'm able to do that, I have to be able to actually engage in the conversation, make the connection. And I need to be able to conduct effective needs analysis conversations so that I can dig in with the client, truly understand what's going on for them in their company, and then be able to connect it to our product and service offerings. So those are examples of things I actually need to do to produce that outcome. What do I need to know? I need to be able to know what industries make most sense for me to prospect against. Which ones make most sense given our product and service offerings? I also need to be able to know what is our brand strategy? What's our unique selling proposition that sets us apart from our competitors? So that when I am making prospecting calls, when I am having those needs analysis conversations, I'm able to speak to our brand and who we are as an organization. That just shows you those are the most critical elements, and those fall within that center band of the need to know information. What falls outside of the dotted line would be the nice to know information, things that aren't critical for my role. So for example, if in another part of my company, we sell a different product or service, it'd be nice for me to know what that product or service is, but because I'm not responsible for selling it, I don't need to know that. Or it'd be nice to know the accounting process and really how a contract is pushed through the system and what that looks like, but I don't need to know the ins and outs of that. So this is an opportunity for you to get even more, again, I like the word surgical because it just helps us think about how precise can we get about our learning so that the individuals on our team within our organization are learning what they need to know to directly impact the outcomes that we need to achieve as an organization. So let's talk about the 5 steps to really operationalizing this in the workplace. We'll go through each one of these individually. First one, identify your company's needs based on goals, strategies, and tactics. So what do we mean here? This is before we can even talk about the types of learning platforms we're going to use, the type of learning and development programs we have, we need to zoom way out. We need to zoom out and be able to identify what are our company goals? What are we trying to achieve as an organization and get super clear on that. So anything that we put in place from this point on ties back to those goals. Let's use Shift as an example. Here at Shift, historically, our business has been comprised of a model that consists of 70% services and 30% products. And by products, I mean the content that we put out there like podcasts and books and articles and webinars and the diagnostic tools that we use when assessing employees and candidates. But we know that as the world is evolving around us, as the world is becoming more digital and employees are becoming more dispersed and more remote, we need to be able to provide them content where they are, whenever they want it. We need to meet their real-time need of getting information. So what does that mean for our company? It means we need to shift our model, no pun intended. We need to become 70% product-based, 30% services, and that our people are developing so that we can do those things. So developing the hard skills like programming and coding and digital marketing and digital transformation so that we can contribute to those outcomes we're trying to achieve. It also means that we need to develop those communication skills so that we can, when interacting virtually or digitally with clients, we're allowing them, enabling them to feel the same way that they feel when we're there with them in person. So we need to focus on those skills like emotional intelligence and empathy and storytelling so that we can effectively relay the same messaging that we do in person when we are digital or remote. That's an example of what it means to really get clear on what we're trying to achieve as an organization. From there, we can set measurable objectives for the learning program that we're looking to launch or roll out. So asking yourself, what are our key objectives for this specific learning and development program? That's where we can go back to this framework and identify, do we need to hyper-focus on onboarding? Is it most critical for our business that we get new hires up to speed faster and performing at higher levels faster? Or do we really need to focus on our existing employee base and understand how do we help them elevate in their existing roles and advance to that next level? So whatever your objectives may be, get really specific and prioritize what's most important. Also ask yourself this question: how will employee performance improve as a result of this learning and development program? Actually writing out your expectations of what you expect to see change within that employee base, within those roles that you're looking at. Lastly, how will employees better be able to achieve business goals after this program? So again, making sure this part is really clear before you put anything into motion. The next step, determine the budget needed to fuel the desired results. So this piece is one that many organizations struggle with, right? Is I don't know what kind of ROI I should expect. I don't know how much to invest in learning and development. I don't have the data that proves anything or shows me anything. And while we hear you, we genuinely do. Trust me, Shift is very data oriented. We use it to inform our decisions. We use it to really guide whatever moves we make. We also know that some things in life just don't require data. They're common sense. So think about, I don't know, like brushing your teeth, or if you decided not to brush your teeth ever again, your teeth would probably fall out, right? Or if you woke up tomorrow and said, you know, I'm never going to eat a bite of food or drink anything ever again, you're probably going to die of malnutrition. This doesn't really take data. Similarly, when we look at, okay, we know we need to grow and evolve as an organization so that we can keep up with the pace of change around us. We better grow and evolve our people, the ones who are actually fueling our business. They're ones responsible for moving the business forward, so we have to invest in them. So my biggest piece of advice for you as a leader is don't let the fact that you don't know the ROI, you don't have the clarity of the data up front, don't let that paralyze you. The worst thing you can do is do nothing at all. So this is where having an agile mindset, being able to try new things, experiment new things, is really going to work in your favor. And it's critical for this to work. So if you thought you were coming out of today's webinar with a fully baked plan or program, I would say maybe lower your expectations a little bit of yourself and know that anything you do from this point on is going to be better than what you're doing now, as long as you're trying something. Just some high-level statistics or data that might be helpful for you to think about as you think about this budgeting piece. On average, companies spend about 1% of their revenue on employee learning and development. And they spend about $1,500 per employee per year on employee learning and development. Again, this varies, of course, depending on the size of the organization, depending on the industry, but those can just help frame your mindset. And again, if you need help just thinking through this piece in particular, please tap the Shift team because we're happy to work with you on that. What's next? Selecting the modalities that fit the context and needed content. So this is another one that many leaders, many companies struggle with. It's because there are now more than ever, there are so many ways to learn out there. There's so many different platforms and modalities. There's hundreds of e-learning sites. There are podcasts galore. There are books. There are in-classroom programs, traditional programs like business schools. There's simulations and on-the-job training. Like there's just a lot out there. So what we want to help you do is narrow your focus a little bit, get more clarity on how to approach this piece. So we want to walk you through these 4 learning experience principles to help you get some clarity here. We'll go through each one individually. Starting on the upper left-hand side, self-directed or self-selected learning. This is really focused and centered around the performer's desire to improve and develop. So in order for this principle to be effective, 4 things need to be in place. Number 1, a company needs to have clarity on what its goals and strategies are. We talked about this. Zooming way out and understanding what are we trying to achieve as an organization. Secondly, they need to understand what are those roles within my company that most directly impact those business outcomes we're trying to achieve. Know that not all roles and not all work within a company is created equal. We need to focus on what's most critical. Once we know what those roles are, then it's defining excellence in those roles. It's getting really clear on what does good look like in those roles. And then lastly, we need to have a performance management or process in place so that we can assess people in those roles against how they're doing today against how they should be performing, how we want them and need them to be performing based on how we defined good or excellent. So once those 4 things are in place, once you as a leader have that clarity and the employee themselves have that clarity, then they can take ownership of their learning and development path, right? We'll talk about this here in a minute, how Shift has leveraged this principle internally to empower every single employee here to develop its own learning and development curriculum. On the upper right-hand side, the second principle, pace of business. So this is looking at time-sensitive information at the moment of need. So what do we mean here? If I'm a new employee entering a company and I'm in finance, and I learn that one of my core responsibilities is going to be to close the books out on a quarterly basis, do you think it's critical for me to know how to close out the books, the ins and outs of how to do that on day 1 of my job? Probably not. That's not necessary for me to know on that first day. What would be more beneficial is implementing some sort of mentorship program where I can shadow other individuals who are currently in that role, watch how they close out the books, and then we can do a role reversal where for the first few quarters, I'm taking a stab at it. I'm having someone shadow me, provide me feedback. That type of learning would be more effective than handing me a huge booklet on the ins and outs of closing out books on day 1 of my job. Third principle, lower right-hand corner, guided. So this is looking at more formalized learning approaches or styles that are really focused on the organizational and role needs. So maybe you have a certification program or process built out for your employees where at the end of it, there's some sort of accreditation or degree received. Maybe bring in an outside facilitator or group to launch a learning experience or learning program, classroom-based or on-the-job training or simulations. So this is kind of your more formalized approach to learning. And then lastly, our insights. So when we talk about insights, we talk about learning from the connected network, really taking advantage of the collective wisdom within an organization and having the tools in place so that we can easily identify subject matter experts within a company and so that we can share that knowledge across the company. And this is more important than ever, knowing that by the end of 2020, at least 40% of the workforce is going to be dispersed, meaning we're going to have people working remotely. We're going to have contracted workers and freelancers. So now more than ever, we got to break down those barriers to learning and create the time and space to allow for people to share information. So here you'll see just some modalities that kind of fit each one of these principles. So for the self-selected, this is where we can talk about those self-directed e-learning platforms like LinkedIn or Coursera or Udemy. Employees can leverage things like podcasts and webinars and books. Again, we'll talk about this more here in a minute. Pace of business, we talked about mentorship programs, simulations. Guided, this is where we bring in potentially that expert facilitator, bring in, have a more formalized certification program that built out, and then insights. This is where we can use tools like Slack to share information or Skype or video conferencing. So again, this is a lot of information and a lot to really absorb. This is kind of like 1.0 of the conversation. If you want to get more specific and granular with your business and go to 2.0 of this conversation, let's set up some time to talk. Happy to work through this with you and really understand and identify what approach do you want to and need to take to learning in the workplace. The last step of operationalizing learning and development is to execute and assess. Again, what we caution against is the idea that you're going to roll out a fully baked program from start to finish and it's going to work perfectly. Instead, we want you to think with an agile mindset, launching experiments at a time, beta testing things, and refining as you go. This is where you're going to get your data. This is where you're going to be able to assess, okay, what are those platforms and programs that people in my company are actually engaging with and what aren't they engaging with? It's also important that we launch more than one type of platform or modality at one time because we have different types of learners in the workplace. One style isn't going to meet the needs of every employee. You're going to have some folks who are more driven by the self-directed learning style where they're able to kind of take over and take control of their own learning path, where you have others that really, really thrive when they're in a classroom-based setting or a group setting and they can learn with other individuals. What's most important is that we try something. And then, again, assess as we go, make refinements as we go, and know that this is an iterative process. So let's talk about what we're doing here at Shift as it pertains to this self-directed or self-selected principle that we talked about. At the beginning of this year, we launched something called Skill Stacks. And the concept is really to empower our employees individually to own their own learning path. So here are the 5 steps that we'll walk through today, just to kind of illustrate how this is working within our organization. So the first step was, of course, as we've talked about, define the company goals and strategy. Not just the executive leadership getting clear on this, but making sure that at the start of this year, every single person in this company has clarity on what we're trying to achieve as a company. We also define the learning goals and objectives on a departmental level and had each and every individual come up with their own individualized goals that tie back to those company goals. So that was step number 1. Once we had that clarity, then every employee was empowered to select at least 2 topics that they want to learn more about and become proficient in by the end of the year that contribute to those company goals and objectives. So this is where we really gave them that freedom, that liberty to determine what do they want to learn based on what they need to know within their role and based on what they're interested in learning and knowing. So within this planned stage of the process, every single employee selected their 2 topics. They defined what proficiency looks like for them by the end of the year, because it's going to be different for every person. And they identified the modality in which they're going to learn, like how are they going to approach this learning process? Is it through online courses? Is it through attending conferences and seminars? Is it by reading a series of books? Every person had a plan put together. We're currently in this 3rd stage of learn, where every single employee is in the middle of the middle, if you will. We're all engaging in our learning path. We're operating on an individual level as it relates to getting and absorbing the information, but then we're operating on a group level when it comes to this 4th step of practice and application. This is probably the most important step of this process, is making sure that whatever knowledge and skills we gain, we're applying it in the work that we do. We're applying it within the client engagements that we have, and that we're teaching it to one another. So we've set up a practice here, an exercise that we call Learn and Share within Shift. And it's similar to the, a show and tell or lunch and learn type of concept, where we dedicate time within team meetings, workshops, retreats for employees to get up, share something they've learned within their curriculum, and teach us new skills so that we can collectively get better. And then lastly, proficiency. Really looking at the end of the year, when that time comes, looking back, did we achieve what we said we were going to achieve? Did we meet our proficiency goals? This is Shift's approach to learning and development, and this is totally iterative. Let me tell you, this is not even today a fully baked plan, but that's intentional. We're trying new things, we're experimenting, we're assessing, and we're only going to get better from here. Here are a few examples of the topic areas that some folks in the organization are focusing on within their skill stack. We have individuals becoming Google certified, some folks focusing on digital marketing, coding, programming, Microsoft Excel, storytelling, agile process. So these are just kind of a handful of some of the topic areas that people are investing in. And we're using a mix of tools, some of which on the right-hand side you see Udemy, edX, Coursera. We have folks really engaged in TED Talk podcasts. You name it, we're really tapping into a lot of different resources, all of which are extremely affordable. The company Shift does subsidize the learning path that individuals take up to a certain level. It's this kind of self-directed learning and approach is probably the most affordable approach you can take, and one that you can launch almost immediately. It's also relevant. It's relevant to the work that we do. It's relevant to the client interactions that we have, and it's customizable. So this is really a personal experience for every employee to engage in learning something they actually care about and they know will advance them in their own career. So to help you, if you're interested in launching a similar type of program, self-directed program or platform, we have some tools available for you to download immediately, right away. So the first one is the Self-Directed Learning and Development Action Plan. So we talked about that stage, that plan stage within Shift Skill Stacks. This is where you can leverage this talking guide or template to help you work with your employees on what are those areas that they want to learn more about, what are the topic areas that they want to invest in, what does proficiency look like, and how does this tie back to the organization's goals. To download, visit this website, shiftthework.com/develop. This is totally free, totally available immediately. This is tool number one. Tool number two is a reflection and progress update guide. So you as a leader need to make sure that your employees are advancing, that they are developing in the ways that they set out to develop in. So this is kind of like a progress, it is a progress update that you can measure either on a monthly or quarterly basis, up to you. But again, a good talking guide and reflection tool to use in one-on-ones, team meetings, things like that. So again, shiftthework.com/develop. Lastly, learn and share practice. So we talked about that's something we do here at Shift. If you're interested in building in a similar exercise within your team, within your business, you can leverage this guide. It's a step-by-step guide on how to launch that kind of program within your company. So definitely go download those materials. Again, back to the book promo, Chris Wilson's book on the master plan. If you haven't done so already and you want to read that book, email us at team@shiftthework.com. And if you want to set up some coaching time with myself or anyone from the Shift team, please visit us. Again, email us at team@shiftthework.com. We can set up some personalized one-on-one coaching support for you on this topic, on anything we've talked about today, or in previous webinars if you've attended any of those. Team@shiftthework.com. My last question for you, and this is, again, your last opportunity to provide your perspective, to participate here. I really want to hear from you. What is one thing you learned today that will help you establish or improve your company's learning and development program? What was your biggest takeaway from today's conversation that is going to help you as you either develop a new program or look to improve an existing one? Give you about a minute or so. Let's see here. Tracy says self-directed learning and development action plan. Absolutely. Once you use that, please provide us feedback on how that conversation is going, how you're working with your team. Really interested to hear how things are going. Let's see. Jim Patton says high-performance learning model framework. Absolutely. Joni, working backwards in the lean approach to learning. 100%. This is something that is really critical for us to, as leaders, get hyper-focused on anything that we're launching, not just a learning development program, but any process that we're launching. Like, let's take that lean approach and think about what do we need to know versus what's nice to know. What else? What else did you take away from today's conversation, from today's webinar? Some of you might be taking away an actual book, which is awesome. Again, one of my favorite books out there. Also, if you're interested in reading Thomas Friedman, The World is Flat, that's another excellent book. That's where he talks about that PQ plus CQ is greater than IQ equation. And Anne says that she learned she's ready to work at Shift. Awesome, Anne. It is a wonderful place to work, and we are really serious about our employees' learning and growth. And so think about how you can translate that within your organization, that passion for learning, really making it the epicenter to everything that you do. Thank you all so much for your participation and contribution there. If there's anything else we can help you with, please email us, team@shiftthework.com. I look forward to meeting you, working with you in the future, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day and a fabulous Memorial Day weekend coming up. Thank you, everyone.